Madhavi, I'd like to talk about bullying. Bullying rightfully has very negative connotations because we know that the effects of being bullied can have long-lasting effects. But what I'd like to do is have an understanding of the definition of bullying as opposed to what might be normal, developmentally appropriate conflict that students might come across on a day-to-day basis at school.
So when we look at bullying, we're looking at social pain, and you're absolutely right. You know, it can have long-lasting impact on a young person for sure. So how we can tell if it's bullying is we're looking at a repetitive, unwanted, intentional cruelty.
Right.
And so when we can see that a child is doing something to another child that is intentionally mean on purpose, intended to harm, and also when they are repeating it again and again, even though they've been asked to stop, and also when there's a power imbalance.
Right.
So by power imbalance, we mean perhaps it's a group of students upsetting one student, so coming at one student, or perhaps an older group of students coming to a younger group of students and intentionally being cruel to them. So when we see this kind of thing, it's really important for us to be responsive to the group who are harming the young people to see what's going on, but also to support that young person through it.
Yes.
Now, most of the time, Helen, what we see is general, usual social clumsiness.
Right.
And during early childhood, our children have only been alive for 4 years, 5 years, 10 years. So they're really inexperienced at getting along with other people. They're here with their learner's plates on. And so by nature of their age and by the fact that they spend all day at school with a broad range of personalities, what will happen is they will have conflict. And conflict is a very normal part of social relationships. And what I find is when our children are hurting, we will naturally feel hurt and we will go into that defensive mode, and we can throw something into the bullying category that is actually just one of those very normal developmental hiccups, those normal ups and downs of friendship. And that's where our ability as parents to listen without judgment, without our own perspective, and to remain as calm and regulated and confident as possible will really help our children and help us differentiate more accurately whether it's bullying or the usual everyday social conflict.
Fantastic. Here's my next questions around support. In terms of a school and in terms of being a parent, how do we best support those that are being bullied? And on the flip side, remembering that there might be a chance that as parents, we're the parent of a child that's perpetrating the bullying. So how does a school and a parent best support their child if they are indeed the perpetrators of bullying?
So the first thing, as always, is be calm. Our regulation matters. If we are calm and regulated, and if we can't be that straight away, we just thank our child for telling us. We gather ourselves, we take a sip of water, we take some breaths, and perhaps we might even ask them to just give us a moment to come back and talk about it. So our calm in their storm is absolutely crucial.
Right.
We don't need two people having a storm at the same time. So that's the first thing. To support the child who's been bullied, the first thing we really need to do is thank them for telling us. Because children often worry about telling their parents because they actually don't want to get other kids in trouble. They really don't.
No.
And they also don't want the trouble to come back onto them.
Yep,
either.
of course, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so, you know, once we're calm and regulated, we want to thank them for telling us. And then we want to also make it really, really clear to our children that they didn't deserve that and that it's not their fault.
Yes, yeah.
Because a lot of the time children can feel it's something about them.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with them. And we're here to build confidence. So we want to make sure that they know that it's not their fault. And then again, we want to help them be the expert in their life. So we want to ask them, what would you like to see happen? You know, and this doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen, Helen.
Yeah.
But it's really letting them think, it through. And quite often they just want it to stop.
Yes, yeah, of course.
And they just want people to care. And, you know, when we let our children talk, gosh, they're clever.
Yeah.
Gosh,
yeah.
they're wise. They
Yes,
have
they
so
are.
much knowledge. So we're really trying to direct the attention back on, well, what do you need and how can I help? And then, of course, we let their teacher know.
Yes.
They've come back and they've spoken about this thing. The other thing is, Helen, we want to look for the red flags. And I think the red flags that let us know that a child is actually being bullied is they're fearful about being at school.
Right.
They might be hiding in the toilet. So we might ask a question like, well, how's this affecting you, sweetheart? You know, this thing happening, how is it affecting you? Let them tell us. They might not have anything to tell us, but they might say, I can't sleep. I have bad dreams. I'm hiding. I don't want to go to school.
Yeah.
When we're hearing things like that, they're the red flags that we look out for. Now, I love that you've asked about what we can do for the child who is bullying. And if you're the parent, you know, the last thing we expect is that one day, you know, we're going to get a call from the school and find out our child has done something that is against our value system. That's so tough. And by nature, we're going to want to defend our child.
Absolutely.
We're going to assume they were just kidding. We're going to assume the other kid did something. This is how we're wired. But the best way to protect our young is to really face head on whatever they're going through. And all of our children will make mistakes. All of our children will make mistakes. That is what childhood is about. That is what teenagehood is about, is we practice being an adult.
Yeah.
And then we have our beautiful parents and our carers and our educators there to support us through. So the worst thing we can do as parents is to defend them and not be realistic about what's happened. So we really want to support our kids and say, hey, sweetie, you know, I got this phone call. I want to give you some time to think about it, because initially they're going to react emotionally and they don't want to disappoint us.
Yeah.
So we just want to hear them out.
Yes.
And we just want to give them time to think about it so they can switch their prefrontal cortex on, which means switching their thinking on. They've moved past the emotion. We show them we can. Say, sweetie, you're not the first one to make this mistake. And in our family, all we need to do is we do our best to own our actions. And when we make a mistake, we do our best to make things better.
Yes. I love that.
And we just lead that way. Because quite often a child who is bullying, there's two reasons for it. One is sometimes a child is really unhappy about a whole bunch of things or really stressed out in their life, and they use their peers to detox. They take it out on their peer group.
They're in pain themselves, yes.
That's it. They're in their own pain. The other thing is sometimes, you know, a lot of the young people who come to me and they've been brought to me because they're bullying, sometimes they're neurodivergent.
Right. Okay.
And they're doing the best they can with the skills and knowledge they have so far, like the rest of us.
Yes.
And so they might be socially clumsy, or they might just simply be stating what they see as a fact.
Yeah.
And they're not having that normal, usual kind of social buffering or that filter. And also they're just young and inexperienced. So we want to really understand this situation well and just watch our adult judgment. We've got to be so careful. We can really make things worse when we don't slow things down and take that time to listen and understand a situation fully.
Wonderful. So if you're a parent or a caregiver of a child who has been on the receiving end of bullying, I think naturally you feel a sense of outrage. You feel like there has been an injustice served, and I understand those feelings. But often we find that parents are thinking that the right course of action in these cases is for there to be a punitive consequence, a concrete consequence, and often they're wanting to know what that consequence will be, because I think as humans, there feels like then that the justice scales have been put in balance once again. I guess what I would like to know is that an effective way of discouraging bullying, or what does the research tell us about what's the best way to deal with the perpetrator of bullying?
Yeah, this is another one of those situations, isn't it, where we react as parents because we love our babies so much and we want them to be okay. So it's allowing ourselves to feel that outrage and upset, and then it's also returning ourselves back into that regulated state to look logically. And when we look logically at punitive consequences, what we know from the global literature is it just makes children angrier. And, you know, our children don't always want to see a punitive consequence in place for their peer that has bullied them. They really don't. I talk to the children who've been bullied. I talk to the children who are bullies. And I think what they want to see is that restorative response. They want the relationships restored and they want peace back. And we know from the literature that what a punitive consequence will do is it will not teach the bully anything at all. It will make them really angry at the child who got them into trouble.
Right.
So they're more likely to bully that child more so.
Right.
But also they're more likely to stay angry and not move forward and constructively. So what we know is it is far better to look at natural consequences. This is what happens in life, is if we harm another person, we need to make things better for that person.
Yes.
So what we can do for the bully is really teach and support that bully as parents, if we're the parent, or for you as educators, to really help them develop empathy.
Yes.
Really help them understand that our words and our actions matter.
Yeah.
And when we say something harmful, another person is receiving that harm, and that has an impact on them. And you see, that way, we're actually upskilling the child from their mistake. They've made a social blunder. We really absolutely, Helen, need to hold them accountable.
Absolutely.
And help them understand personal responsibility, because the young bullies with whom I work who aren't held accountable for a long time actually carry a lot of guilt.
Yes.
They know they've done the wrong thing. They know that they've intentionally hurt another person.
Yep.
So they absolutely need boundaries from parents.
Yes.
Parents need to say, you're not the first person to make this mistake, sweetheart, but in our family, we try to be kind. We try to do the right thing. And when we do the wrong thing, we make it better.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, we know from the literature that this is what works. We know that punitive consequences don't work. And I think we need to trust our teachers. You know, I'm a parent. I have 3 children. If someone is unkind to my children, it hurts my heart very deeply. And I also know that teachers and principals and school psychologists have studied this. They've studied children, that they study restorative practices.
Yes.
And I really show my children my trust in their ability to support them, but also to support the child who's done the wrong thing. I don't need to know what the school is doing, because I also respect the privacy of that other child who is developing and growing at the time. And I think the other thing, if I may, is I think it's really important for us to be careful not to talk too much with other parents about another child, because as a species we do this thing, and I spoke about this in my presentation when I visited your beautiful school. We have this negativity bias. We negatively track all the things that go wrong in our lives more than the things that go right, and we can start to negatively track some of our children's friendships, relationships, and if they've been in hardship, and then we can start to talk to other people, and then we can start to develop that culture amongst ourselves in a group that are naturally wired to protect our young.
Yes.
And this can cause more difficulty for our own children later on when they see that, no, this isn't compassionate. The values aren't about compassion and understanding and forgiveness. They're about, you did the wrong thing once, or you did the wrong thing 10 times, and you can never improve or change. And that stops our children from developing that growth mindset about people and their ability to cope and be adaptable along the way.
I love that. It's interesting to think about how much we are under scrutiny from our children. They're taking their cues from us. So I just thank you. I just love that you've given us some very sound advice on how to deal with bullying and to think of it from both perspectives. And I also agree that as parents and caregivers to, I guess, set the example of trusting the school is a wonderful thing to do, because when children trust the school, they obviously feel like they're safe here. They have that greater sense of belonging, which we know contributes greatly to their happiness and well-being when they're here with us.
It really does. It's my pleasure, Helen. Thank you for having me.